So, moving on now to Battle of the Planets Witchblade. Now, Battle of the Planets, most of you guys would know is an old 80s, 70s, 80s, even probably earlier than that, cartoon that is pretty much an anime remake. It's better known in Japan known as Gatchaman, which is pretty much an anime series that was brought to America along with Speed Racer and a lot of other classic animes. In here, however, Top Cow and Image for a while, was able to have the rights to Battle of the Planets for a bit under Alex Ross, who was a big supporter of this because Battle of the Planets is one of his favorite things. In fact, he did all the covers and he did the majority of interior art for a lot of books. Now, in here, yes, this exists, by the way, Battle of the Planets Witchblade, which is probably one of the most unique crossovers I ever found. I've been looking for this for a long time, and on the grounds of I really want to find it. I consider myself I'm a fan of Gatchaman. I'm gonna use the actual anime title. I can't believe I'm doing that, but I'm a fan of that series. I like it, but I'm not a huge fan. But I get a general gist of the show. But I'm also a huge fan of Witchblade. So when I found out this existed, I had to check it out. There's also a Battle of the Planets. There's two actually. There's two Battle of the Planets Thundercats crossovers, which I've been still looking for. There's also a Thundercats Superman crossover, but I can't seem to find that anywhere. Anywho, getting on to this. Now, this is actually kind of an interesting take on the crossovers. This is actually told from an old woman, an old woman's perspective when she was young, and she's telling her grandson about what it was like under the reign of Zoltar. Zoltar was pretty much like Zoltar and Spectra were like the two big villains of the Battle of the Planets series. And pretty much, the Battle of the Planets villains had conquered their homeworld when she was a child, and her mother died, and she's pretty much been running around giving out food to the prisoners. We also come across Princess. Yes, that's her name. She goes by the identity of Princess, and more or less, she came first before the rest of the Gatchaman team, and she was captured. And also during all this, while the people of that planet are being forced to harvest, the bad guys uncover an ancient relic, which is the Witchblade, and they start using people for, testing it, and they also bring in a character known as Reinhardt. Reinhardt, if you know Witchblade, he's a unique villain in there. And we don't know, because this thing is told in the far future. Even though it's a past story, this is pretty much in the future of the Witchblade series. This is kind of like a Witchblade Tales story. And in here, it's kind of cool, because Zoltar's telling Reinhardt, you're using too many you're using too many of my workforce. I'm ruthless, but I'm practical. Find somebody quick, or I'll replace you easily. So that was kind of interesting. I like that line of I may be ruthless and bloodthirsty, but I'm practical. So he's kind of thinking ahead here, rather than throw hundreds of useless casualties. He needs a workforce for mining. And when Princess comes along, the Witchblade psychically reaches out to Princess, basically telling her, I've been looking for someone like you for so long, and it basically, when he reaches into her mind, it shows her because the Witchblade in here speaks. And I know that in the Witchblade comics, yeah, it's spoken before, but it's an interesting conversation between it and Princess, and it tells Princess everything. It shows her in one good splash page of all the other Witchblade hosts, and finally at the bottom of the page you see Sarah. You see Sarah Prazzini, and she's not. And Princess is just not amused by any of this. She's like, "Yeah, nice light show. I've seen better." But it is a pretty cool story. I'll give it that. It does have a very anime feel. It is very retro. The dialogue's a lot more updated, because if you've ever seen the original anime, the dialogue in the English dub is just kind of bad. Remember, this is like early anime, and in this anime of its time was gory in the original Japanese, and in here it's kind of updated, but it still had kind of kind of stiff dialogue. But in here it's more updated. All the characters are a little more grittier. They're basically fighting a war, and they're a lot more updated, and it's really cool dialogue. I'll give it that. And more or less, Princess eventually merges with the Witchblade, and it goes on. The problem is, it feels a little forced. So this is a one-shot comic, but I feel like this should have been a two-parter at least. Because the thing is, you see a lot of dialogue, and the Witchblade is just shown. It isn't until the last 7 pages that Princess merges with the Witchblade, and it completely just takes her over, and then the rest of the team shows up. You don't see Tiny. You don't see Tiny, but you see Mark, and you see the other two members. And they manage to... Basically, they give back her cybernetic transmitter that allowed her to get her costume back, and that somehow expels the Witchblade. So it kind of just fails on that. But in the end, the ending is kind of interesting. We find out later that the old woman who's been telling the story has been the bearer of the Witchblade for the past 60 years after Princess. She's been the Witchblade's bearer for about 60 since she was a child. It has a fun little ending. Basically, the Witchblade is just tired of her. He's just like, every time you tell that brat that story, I'm painted as the villain. And then she's like, oh hush. And he's like, you need to stop painting me as the villain. I've helped you multiple times throughout your entire life. And you see all this woman's career, like she's been a pilot of the Red Impulse. If you know the anime, you'll know that. She basically has been a guardian of her home world, and then the Witchblade just finally gives up and goes, can we at least kill those wolves that have been bugging us? And she's like, I'll think about it. And that's pretty much the end of the story. It does come to an abrupt halt, but, for what it is, it's kind of cool. I just wish there was more Witchblade, because this is more of a Battle of the Planet story than a Witchblade story. It does feel like the Witchblade was just thrown in there at the last second. And that's kind of the problem I have with it. But is it a still good story? Yes. Would I suggest this to Battle of the Planets fans and Witchblade fans? Absolutely. It's still a cool crossover. I mean, granted, this is you only see Sarah Prezzini in one little flashback because this is supposed to be a future story, and the Witchblade is eternal. So, yeah. Anywho, guys, hope you guys enjoyed this, and I've still got one more crossover to talk about, and boy, wow, you guys are going to be just stunned. So stay tuned for that. Later.